Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The goddess next door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. When I think about the recent scandal involving Roseanne Barr, it makes me shake my head. And the reason why it makes me shake my head is not because Roseanne Barr made a racist tweet on Twitter that led to her rebooted sitcom getting canceled and costing over 200 people their jobs. It makes me shake my head because the person in charge of ABC was a black woman. Now, I've always advocated for seeing more black people in executive positions in the entertainment industry because we don't have that many people of color in the entertainment industry. And when it comes down to black people, we rarely get an opportunity to be an executive of a major television network. And to see a black woman get this position and not use her power in a right way really makes me shake my head. Because for a black woman to sit there and greenlight the sitcom of a known racist, that's something that's really head scratching to me. Because Roseanne Barr's history of racist behavior and racial statements is known publicly everywhere. However, this black woman, seeing this history of racism from this white woman, decides to greenlight her show. And her greenlighting this show shows me that having the wrong black person in an executive position in Hollywood is no different than having a white supremacist in that position, because this black woman's decision to greenlight the sitcom of a known racist is just what a white supremacist would do. Now, when it comes down to this decision, it's one of the most boneheaded ones I have ever seen. And I've seen quite a few boneheaded decisions by television executives like your Fred Silverman back in the day. And I look at this decision, and again, it shows me how deep the self-hatred lies in black women. But all I have to do is look at some of her business decisions to see how deep her self-hatred is. Because last year, this same black woman greenlit the sitcom The Mayor for broadcast on ABC. And this television show featured numerous racial stereotypes about black men. I watched this Mayor sitcom and I said, this is one of the most racist things I've ever seen. Here we have a sitcom featuring a young black man from a single mother household who's aspiring to be a rapper, and he decides to run for mayor not because he cares about the community he lives in, but because he wants to get his name out there for his rap record, and he wants to sell rap records. I haven't seen such a racist premise in my life since the days of Amos and Andy. And it really is quite troubling that here we have a black female executive who greenlights this project and says it's perfectly okay to go on a television schedule. And that again makes me shake my head because again shows me how deep the self-hatred this black woman has to go out here and greenlight this sitcom for the schedule, because there were numerous other projects I bet out there that were far better than this, but she decides to choose this one. And it shows me that when it comes down to some of these black people out here, they would rather be mammies and coons for white supremacy than try to make an effort to improve the quality of life for black people and try to create a positive image of black people, because this woman was in charge of a major television network and she had the power to change the image of black people. But instead of going out here to change the image of black people, what this black woman decided to do was go along with the status quo, be a mammy, and then continue to further degrade the image of black people. Because ABC had a known history of degrading the image of black people on shows like Scandal and shows like Blackish. And here we have a black woman who's supposed to be in charge of this network, and instead of trying to make efforts to improve the image of black people, she decides to continue to further degrade the image of black people with a sitcom like The Mayor. And then to add insult to injury, she then greenlights the Roseanne show featuring a known racist for a reboot. Again, with a black woman like this in charge, we don't need Ku Klux Klansmen, we don't need neo Nazis, and we don't need white supremacists to destroy us. All we need are some of these mammies out here, and they'll do the job for those white supremacists by going out here and promoting media that degrades the African American image and promotes stereotypes to the next generation of children to follow. And again, this is quite troubling because for years, people like myself have advocated and said we need more black executives at television networks and at movie studios, because if we had black people at these television networks and these movie studios, they would make an effort to improve the black image and try to refute many of the racist stereotypes out there featuring black people. But what I see clearly by having this black female in charge, that nothing is going to change, because when you have black females like this that have deep self-hate issues and are looking for white approval from white daddy, these mammies, what they're going to do is toe the party line and continue to promote the status quo. And that's what this woman did when she went out here and greenlit Roseanne for a reboot. Now, when I look at ABC's schedule and I know ABC's history, there were numerous other sitcoms that she could have rebooted and brought back for a run in the mid-season. And one of the sitcoms she could have brought back easily was Family Matters. Now, Family Matters featured some of the most positive images of African Americans out there and was a top-rated sitcom for years. And she could have easily brought back most of the cast for Family Matters for a reboot. Moreover, she could have also brought back Sister Sister, which was on ABC for about a year or so, and she could have easily brought that show back as well. Now, both of those shows, again, featured positive images of African Americans, and the casts were already available for work. But she did, instead of going out here and going out here to support those positive black sitcoms, no, she decides to go out here and greenlight the show of a racist. And again, that's really troubling when you think about it. Here you have a black person with executive power and the power to go out here and make a television schedule be whatever they want. And instead of going out here and trying to create some sort of positive images of African Americans to go along with these other mainstream images, what she decides to do is go out here and promote some of the most degrading programs that feature African Americans in them. And she then goes out here and greenlights the sitcom of a known racist. Now, if I were in that position of power, I could think of a dozen other shows I would be trying to put on that schedule. And I would really be seriously making efforts to try to get positive stories featuring African Americans on the schedule. Because when I take a look at the black image from a panoramic perspective, it's in the worst shape that it's ever been in. And when we have black people like this in charge of things, it's not going to change, because it shows me how deep the self-hatred lies in many of these black people. And that these black people are no different than the coons, the mammies, and the bedwenches of old, and that they'll sit there and go along with their white slave masters instead of trying to change the image of African Americans. Now, with these type of black people controlling our media, again, it is no different than having a white supremacist in charge, because a white supremacist would be the type of person to say, okay, I'll bring back Roseanne, a known racist, for a reboot, instead of going out here and trying to find new sitcoms and new material from black people, or trying to go out here and trying to find a reboot of a more positive black show. And that's something you would think that a black executive would do. But when I take a look at ABC and seeing a black woman in charge, and seeing that what's on their schedule are shows like this year, Scandal, which recently went off the air, Blackish, which is a certified minstrel show, and seeing shows like The Mayor being put up on the schedule, it's really sad to see this coming, not from white supremacists, but to come from a black woman. A black woman who was supposed to, I thought, be self-aware enough to do what was right for her people, But it seems like to me she would rather just do what is right for white supremacy than the black community. And this is why I can start to agree with David Carroll on one point that there must be something mentally wrong with many of these black folks out here, because to sit there and greenlight the sitcom of a known racist, that's a mind-boggling thing. There has to be some sort of mental issue with this black female executive to go out here and do something like this. And it shows me how deeply pervasive white supremacy and self-hatred are in the minds of some of these black folks out here, that you're going to go out here and greenlight the sitcom of a known racist when you have the power to greenlight almost any project you want or approve any project you want. Because when it comes down to the entertainment business, it is very hard to get a project greenlit. And here we have a black person in an executive position, in a position of power, a position to allocate economic resources for production of any project out there. And instead of her trying to direct some of those dollars to a black prodco or a black production company, or try to get one of these more positive black scripts out here greenlit for production, she decides to go out here and produce a sitcom featuring stereotypes like the mayor, and then she decides to go out here and greenlight the reboot of a sitcom featuring a known racist. For a black woman to do that, again, shows me that having the wrong black person in a position, again, is no different than having a white supremacist in that position. And that if this is where diversity is would take us, then it's deeply troubling overall. Because again, I would think that a black person who loved black people would make an effort to try to reach out to some of those small black prodcos out there and try to get one of their projects greenlit, not go out here and continue to toe the party line of white supremacy, which has been the culture of the ABC's parent company, Disney, for years. Because when it comes down to Disney, your Disney has been on a tear, presenting some of the most degrading images of black men in a lot of their media. Whether it be the pansexual Lando Calrissian in Solo, a Star Wars story, to promote the idea of black men being sexual deviants, or the emasculated T'Challa in their billion-dollar box office hit, Black Panther, they have not been making any sort of efforts to try to present positive images of African Americans in any of their media. And what's really troubling is we have this black person in charge who isn't even forward-thinking enough to think about the African American image during her term as the head of ABC's television schedule. What's really sad about this black woman being in charge is that I can think of Brandon Tartikoff 35 or 40 years ago, who was far more forward-thinking than she was. Because your Brandon Tartikoff, seeing NBC about to go out of business, decided to bring Bill Cosby onto the NBC television schedule back in 1984. And when he brought Bill Cosby onto the schedule in 1984, it literally brought NBC back to life and made it the #1 television network for 5 years, and made it one of the top television networks all the way up into the early 2000s. And that was all because he decided to go out here and bring in Bill Cosby to usher it with the Cosby Show, and that ushered in an entire golden age of black media that led to many kids like myself growing up to see positive images of African Americans, balanced images of African Americans, and humanized images of African Americans. And what's really sad is we had a white man like Brandon Tartikoff be more of a forward thinker related to the black image than the black woman who was put in charge of ABC, who has been given this executive power but does not understand the responsibility as related to that power. Because if she understood the responsibility as related to that power, I doubt she would be out here greenlighting shows like The Mayor, supporting shows like Blackish on the schedule, and supporting shows like Scandal being on the schedule, and deciding to greenlit the sitcom of Unknown Racist. When I take a look at a black woman like that, she shows me she does not understand the power of her position, the responsibility of her position, and the responsibility she has to black people, and the responsibility she has to protect the black image and try to make efforts to get a positive image of black people out there for the next generation of kids and adults to see. Because when it comes down to these TV shows just aren't entertainment, they are also programming, and they show us a way that the world is and the way to think about the world. And that's something that's really sad, that this so-called strong, educated black woman who's supposed to be in charge of one of the most major television networks is not a forward thinker, is not a visionary, and is not creative enough to think forward enough to say, hey, I've got this position of power, a position of power many black people have been advocating for over 30 years, and instead of her thinking about making efforts to have an impact on the black image, she decides to further degrade the black image, and then she decides to bring in a known racist onto her television schedule. And that's, again, really embarrassing when you think about it, because this is going to be her legacy as one of the first black executives at one of these television networks, and her legacy is going to be one that not moves the black image forward, but drives the black image backward. And again, this really shows me how deep the self-hatred is as related to many of these mammies out here and many of these Negroes out here, because they're not thinking about the black image and the big picture of black people. All they're thinking about is all the money they're making in their executive position and how they're going to be a big shot with white people, and not thinking about how the images they present in media are going to long-term impact black people, and how their control over this media is going to impact the black community in the long term. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my positive SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the Eastine series, The Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.